This is our official closing film of the 12th Annual Toronto Beaches Film Fest. Take it away, hosts.
So I'm very excited to have two wonderful stars of Road to Revolution here with us. We have writer, director, and producer Peter Furst, also subject in the film, and director and producer Garnet Mae, who is also a subject in the film. Thank you both for joining us, and I want to congratulate you on being nominated for Best Road Trip Film, Best Extreme Adventure Film, and Best Documentary Feature.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. As you say, it's just past 6 a.m. in the middle of winter here in Sydney. It's a pleasure to get up. We're really honoured to be your closing film in particular here in Toronto, and we wish that we're enjoying a nice craft beer with you guys there.
Well, hopefully this serves as your morning dose of coffee, and we'll get the day started off on the right foot.
Thank you.
Why Che Guevara? What interested you about him, and what was so inspiring to you to plan this whole trip around him?
I lived in Peru for a couple of years. While I was there, Che Guevara, it's a weird kind of thing in the way that we may see, the kind of like, what would Jesus do kind of bracelets and things all around in the West. You'd see Che Guevara's image on the back of taxis, on the walls of restaurants, everywhere, with this whole idea of, what would Che do? And Che was seen as this almost messianic hero in South America. So I, started reading about him. And one of the books that I read was this book called Motorcycle Diaries, or, Notes of the Voyage, as he actually called it. And it was just amazing to see this final year med student who decided to put his medical studies aside and then to go on this trip across Latin America. And then as he went across Latin America, when he saw the people there, when he saw particularly the suffering of the poor and the indigenous, it really shaped who he was and who he became. And I myself was in the final year of my law degree. I'd spoken to Garnet about it. And Garnet's one of these people that basically nothing's impossible. And so I'd always told him, it'd be amazing to do this journey and to see what impact it would have on us. And as I say, for Garnet, basically nothing's impossible. And he said to me, okay, we'll do it. I'll come there in February. And I actually thought he was joking. And then he rang me and he was like, yeah, man, I'm at the airport in Sydney. I'm just about to jump on the plane. I'll see you in 3 days. I'm like, what do you mean you'll see me in 3 days? And then I think he actually had to swap me the money so I could jump on a plane to Buenos Aires to start. And I guess the rest is history. It was just, his spirit and his love for the people, his love for the indigenous of South America. It's hard not to be inspired and hard not to have a bit of that experience that he had.
Yeah, I guess for me, I had the shirt before I even knew who Che Guevara was. That image of him looking sternly into the wind, which is just a great image. And I guess in some ways kind of sums up who he was to some degree. In that image, you can see that he's some sort of military leader. He has long hair. He's kind of a rebel, but he's very inspiring. And I guess people relate to the image and are pulled to the image because of, some connection that they have in themselves, which I guess Pete and I had. And to be able to retrace that trip in history and to see what inspired him. Yeah, that was just a great place for us to start what's become a series now. So, and an incredible trip, like crossing South America several times. We crossed the Andes, I think 3 or 4 times. We went down the Amazon River. We ended up in Cuba at the very end to talk about his legacy. Just an incredible journey that we never would have done. I mean, we were both experienced travelers, but I guess shooting this doco just has taken us places that most people would never even dream of going. And it's also just based on, this idea of going where great people have gone before.
Of all these wonderful places that you got to travel in the time since, which location has particularly stuck in your memory?
Oh gosh, for me it's the most recent fear that we've had, which was being in Haiti in Cité Soleil. Just an incredible place, but obviously very messed up. And I guess it's just, you just wonder how these places exist in society, given that how developed the rest of the world is. And I guess it seems how little concern the rest of the planet has for these places. Yeah, I guess a lot of people don't know. I mean, people might have heard of Haiti, but they don't really know what's going on there, or they don't really care. It certainly seems that the government's mostly that way. People tend to care about themselves. But
I think during Road to Revolution, the Amazon stood out to me when we're in Iquitos, beginning of the Amazon River. It's a place like nowhere else where, most of the houses are actually built on stilts so they can float, and you're just seeing kids, swimming in the river, and you come up with nature that's vibrant everywhere, and we played with the jaguar, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's easy for us in the Western world, at least myself, to get kind of caught up in all these Western things and Western problems. And what's amazing when you go to somewhere like Iquitos and you see the people actually just really joyful. They don't have all the trappings that we have, but they have real joy. I mean, even when you go to Cuba, which is, I have real problems with the oppression of the Cuban government of its people, but the joy there in the music and the dancing, it's really infectious. You walk down the street there and there's a joy. It's, something I think some of us forget. We forget to just stop and experience joy. I guess the full spectrum, we kind of illegally got dropped at the border between Argentina and Chile. And there we had the army actually picked us up and took sympathy on us and gave us a lift the whole way, across the border, which was great. And then they took us for a tour around and showed us the glaciers and stuff in southern Chile. So they were incredible. All the way to the other extreme, which is, entering Cuba, where I went to the airport and they searched all our stuff. We tend to go separately through customs when we're doing a shoot, so that if, one person gets detained, we have a hard drive on each of us and stuff like that, so it doesn't get taken. But they took my stuff aside, they searched all through it, and they saw I had a notebook with mentions of Che Guevara. And so we're like, oh, what's this? What are you saying about Che? And then they said, okay, well, where have you come from? I'm like, well, I'm from Sydney. And they're like, yeah, but how did you get here to Cuba? I'm like, well, actually, to be honest, I went via Europe here to the US and then Peru, and then I came down to kind of recounted all of the countries he'd been through. And they've gone, okay, no worries. Can I see all the tickets, please? And I'm like, obviously not. So that was about 4 hours that day taken, but
yeah,
not so bad.
I had no idea. I had no idea where Pete was. I just passed through the airport and was waiting for Pete casually on the other side, going, "Geez, he's taking a long time to get through customs here."
Trying to leave was just as hard. We didn't realize that there was an exit tax. And this first docker in particular, we were absolutely, if we'd had $3 more, we would have spent $3 more. We were absolutely down to our last penny trying to make it. And we've gone to leave and they're like, well, you can't leave without the departure tax. And then I think we only had enough money for one of us to technically depart. And then what did you do? You managed to get, so I think Garnet went through and then you managed to get some money somehow transferred to us so I could get through.
We didn't have Wi-Fi until we cleared customs, I think, or something. And then I cleared customs and managed to get someone to send us some money so Pete could leave.
What drew you to the Motorcycle Diaries, the book? Did you like the writing, the subject matter?
I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it. It's a kind of a beautiful, frank and honest diary. I mean, it really is a diary. Like I say, its original titles was just Notas de Viaje. So it literally is from his viaje, his travels, literally just his notes. And so you kind of get the sense where he hasn't tried to, he's not necessarily writing for a specific market or to get published or anything like that. So it's just an honest expression of his thoughts. You just get the sense of the energy of this, young, 22, 23-year-old med student at the time. But you can see how he evolves through the book. And by the time when they're saying goodbye to each other in Bogota, as in Alberto, his travel companion, and Che are both committed to changing Latin America. They'd seen so much oppression, the indigenous and the poor in the countries they went through in the 50s, that you could just see that it was just that pure mark. And the fact that it was crafted to try and convince someone, it's not a political pamphlet. It's not a book that's been tried to be created to be sold. It just has that true innocence and energy, and I find Che incredibly inspiring.
How closely did you follow Che's trail on his journey through South America?
And to be honest, when we started in Buenos Aires, we basically had a copy of the book and an A3 map of South America that had just this line drawn through it. And we pretty much followed it, very closely as we could. There are some points where it is challenging, like in Peru. He went across the Andes earlier and caught a boat, a place called Calpa, all the way up to the start of the Amazon, and then they built a raft and went down the Amazon on a raft. That would have been time prohibitive, so we flew from Lima to Iquitos. But apart from that, it was pretty actually close to his itinerary. We really wanted to ideally see as many places as he's seen and, meet a couple of people that we had who'd met him. But it was pretty close.
How do you feel about Che's death? Do you think the CIA bears some responsibility for it?
Without question, the CIA helped train the Bolivian soldiers that were sent to assassinate him. As you know, in the 60s, the United States was very much in a state of red peril. They really thought that, communism was this massive threat, and they were aggressive in their suppression of it, whether it's they ordered the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, who was the first democratically elected leader of the Congo. So there was a very aggressive anti-communist feeling And they were worried that Che would sway the youth and take control away from the West. And that's why they sent US troops to help train these Bolivian army. It's a tragedy in my eyes, but it's also just politics. He's not the first or the last person to be killed, and many US people were killed as well. I think during that period of J. Edgar Hoover in the United States.
Yeah, it's not like a lot has changed in terms of global politics and who the United States is willing to topple in order to, who knows, sell weapon, accrue oil, whatever means. They seem to be playing God on a global scale. Just creates a vacuum where, usually a military despot will step in.
And I think it created, in this specific instance, it created a martyr of Che, and it's probably something that added to his mystique. He's an icon of revolution for millions of people, and that's only been enhanced by the United States assisting in his assassination.
What was one of the most emotional or just like striking moments that you experienced?
Definitely when we were in a riot in the Congo. We'd been stuck in Kisangani for a couple of weeks longer than we'd wanted to, waiting for this barge to go down the river, because every day we'd go back to the port and they'd say, yeah, we're leaving tomorrow. Of course, we'd get back there and they'd say, we're not leaving today. We're definitely leaving tomorrow. So we eventually got on this barge and head down the river, which was going to take us all the way to capital, Kinshasa. It was the wrong season and the barge kept getting bogged and we were going to miss our flight. So we ended up getting off at a little town on the halfway down called Bumba. And then we ended up getting a flight to Kinshasa. However, that flight had to go back to Kisangani. When we went to get on the connecting flight to Kinshasa, they told us the flight wasn't till the next day. We're like, oh, you got to be kidding us. And then we went to the hotel, and then just coincidentally the next day, the people of the town had decided to stage a protest against the corrupt police, and they weren't allowing anyone to get anywhere. And we obviously needed to desperately get to the airport to get this flight to get back to Australia. And every time we went down a road, that would be sort of confronted by marching people, banners, and very angry. So we kept going down different roads. Eventually we came to this road where it was the only way to the airport, and there were tires burning. There was a very angry mob, and we tried to pass through and they stopped the car, and we were surrounded by 5 or 6 people with rough screaming abuse at us. Pete and I were very scared at the moment. We were with a couple of other people, 2 doctors that were just coincidentally in the car, also going to the airport, and the driver talking to these angry people. And we ended up giving them, I think, the equivalent of like 50 cents, and their anger turned to smile and they let us pass. And then we passed through tear gas and we were both crying, and we heard bullets being fired. Turned out people had been killed pretty much left, right, and center of us. When we got to the other side, I think we were extremely relieved but extremely shocked to have realized what we just experienced. And yeah.
What have you learned about yourself through the making of this film?
Well, for this film, there's definitely a little bit of revolutionary in all of us. It's amazing, when you're following what Che did, how just one person had an impact on a whole country, on a whole country's history, on a whole country's political movement, for good or for bad. It makes you realize what an individual is actually capable of, especially if they have a dream and something they're willing to fight and die for. It's a powerful thing. Even in our limited ability, just bringing the stories of like forgotten places to people's eyes can possibly help to change the narrative on places. So, reaching as wide an audience as possible is important in that regard. I guess what Pete touched on as well is the ability to make friends and connect with people of all different cultures. When we went to Iran, we hadn't even crossed the border when we were adopted by a family who offered us a place to stay, took us out for lunch, introduced us to their family. Just the most incredible connection and all through Iran. Just the taxi drivers that took us places that had, fought in the war, that had bullets still in their body. Yeah. So what have I learned? I guess also about each other.
What I learned from following Che's footsteps is that basically most things are possible. Everyone thinks that things are impossible, and we're told it again and again on the trip, oh, you can't do this, no, the boat doesn't go there, you can't go into there. And I think in life, like, people they take no for an answer too many times when you can't do anything. And I think what it told me, like, it showed me the strength that I have myself. And I think what Che's example shows you is that strength is not the way that it's often portrayed. It's not that toxic masculinity. Strength actually is most shown through compassion. Che showed his strength by giving up his spare blanket to traveling workers that he met, even though it was a cold night. He showed his strength by giving away his last dollars. He showed his strength by that compassion. I always, in my head, I have this memory of Muhammad Ali, the boxer, when he was getting arrested for refusing to fight in Vietnam, even as he was being arrested, he came in big and strong and he like shake the hands of the people who were arresting him and show respect. Like that's strength. He was strong, he was compassionate and baller. Like I'm just impressed. But I think that's the true sign of strength. And you notice it when, you know, on our trips, the places we've been, when you're showing compassion to whether they're AIDS victims, whether they're, you know, young orphans that we've met, you know, strength is showing compassion and love to those people. And I think these trips have showed me that I'm strong.